Good evening, and welcome to Jazz at the Library. Jazz at the Library takes place 9 times out of the year, January through June. So our next Jazz at the Library for the season will be the 18th. We have a lovely guitar player coming in from Los Angeles to do the presentation. There are 3 primary sponsors to Jazz at the Library. JazzFresno, we're an organization that promotes jazz in the Valley through education and performance. And if you're interested in anything jazz, go to our website, www.jazzfresno.org. There's a jazz calendar, including events that take place in the high school, City College, and Cal State Fresno. The 3 primary, so JazzFresno is a primary sponsor, Woodward Park Library is a primary sponsor, and the 3rd primary sponsor are these wonderful jazz musicians that come in 9 times out of the year and provide us live music. It's just wonderful to get their support. They're so generous. So if there are students here, we do have verification sheets that we'll sign at the end of the program to indicate that yes, in fact, you've been here. So it's my, and one more thing. If you like what you hear and what you see, we are always open to donations. You can donate on our website, or you can make a donation back at our merchandise booth. Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter for tonight, Tim Shaghoian. He is a musician, he's an educator, and he is a composer. He's currently working on his master's degree at Cal State Fresno in music performance, his master's degree. And as a part of that, he's also an associate teacher in the jazz studies program there, where he teaches a class in small jazz ensemble. Tim got his bachelor's degree at the University of Nevada in jazz performance, and worked or studied with a very famous modern jazz saxophonist, Peter Epstein. Tim is a accompanist and a co-director of the Kastner Intermediate School Jazz Choir, and he also is on the faculty of Milestones, which is one of our programs under the umbrella of JazzFresno, where he teaches small jazz ensemble, saxophone, and improvisation. He's also on the board of directors at La Sierra Creative Arts Camp, where he teaches woodwinds and leads jazz workshops. In 2016, Tim was the featured presenter at the San Joaquin Valley Jazz Festival, where he played multiple of his own original compositions. In 2018, he recorded as a co-leader his first CD with a group called TTRC, and it was recorded this also has a lot of original compositions and improvisation on it. And it was recorded at a famous studio in Los Angeles, Sunset Sound. So it's my pleasure to introduce Tim Shaghoian.
please tell me as we go on. I can't hear you anymore. Oh shoot. My dear grandmother can't hear me, so that's all that really matters. I have to use the microphone. Can you hear me now, Roro? Good. Thank you so much to JazzFresno and Tom Breen. Yeah, the JazzFresno. To Tom Breen, I'm sure I say this every time, as probably most presenters do, that I'm always stunned with his incredible memory and ability to introduce and announce. And I should have sent him a shorter bio, because I don't know if we have any time for the presentation now. So again, thank you so much. We're happy to be here. And this is actually the third time I've presented for Jazz at the Library. The first two that I did were decidedly more, let's say, modern jazz concepts. I did odd meters in jazz and electronics in jazz, so I thought it might be good to maybe go backwards a little bit in a positive way. And so we're delving into the Great American Songbook today. And hopefully we're happy with that. Anybody know the tune that we just played? Yes? You can say it aloud if you know.
Night and Day.
Night and Day, written by the great Cole Porter, who is our subject for this evening. And I wanted to start out with something a little more up-tempo, because the rest of the night's going to be really slow. I'm just warning you now. We're doing a ballad. So Cole Porter's one of the great composers, one of the great contributors to the Great American Songbook. And the piece that we're really going to be focusing on today is Every Time We Say Goodbye, which was composed in 1945, 44 or 45. Did all this work and I can't even remember at this point. And it was first played at, or in conjunction with, the Broadway production Seven Lively Arts. And it's not a production that I was aware of at all. So if you are, you're one step ahead of me already. And it was interesting to me that the first person that really recorded this to a 2-track 45 was Benny Goodman. He was in the production. He was in Seven Lively Arts. So the whole reason that I kind of got into doing this was not even for a presentation at all. It was just for my own interest in learning this song. Specifically learning this song to be able to play with my own groups. And because I was somebody who kind of delved deeply into modern jazz first, and then kind of went backwards into more of the history of jazz and standards, which I don't know if I would recommend that as a path now at this point, but it worked for me. I got there eventually. And when I really first started out playing jazz standards, it was like, I don't want to play jazz standards. I'm not interested in it. I don't feel a connection to them. It's not the music of the time, of artists that I was interested in when I started playing music. And so if I did play standards, it would be at a jazz jam session, or something where somebody literally said, you have to play this jazz standard, play it now for me. It's required, or something, for school. And I didn't really delve that deep into it. I just said, I'll find some lead sheet of it, some chart, one-page chart that has the melody, and maybe I'll listen to a version of it that I can find, or maybe not. Maybe I'll just read it and play it to the best of my abilities at the time. And now looking back, I'm so glad that I no longer have that perspective with jazz standards, and that my approach has evolved quite significantly. not the least of which because jazz standards and jazz lead sheets have a complicated relationship. I'm going to put up a projection here for you. Oh, that's what it was. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Hopefully we will be graced by the projection. But as it arrives for us, as I was saying, there's a kind of a complicated relationship with jazz lead sheets and jazz standards themselves. Here it's coming up. And one reason for this is that lead sheets have been written, lead sheets were written by many different sources, but oftentimes through jazz history by players or people that studied jazz that weren't necessarily, let's say, the most careful or adept at creating these charts or representations of these great songs. And so we get things like this. This is a lead sheet of Every Time We Say Goodbye, and it does have a copyright on it, 1944, Chappelle & Co. Inc. And I have studied this lead sheet carefully, and I can say that I have not found a single recorded version that sounds like this. Not even really that close, honestly, with a lot of the chord changes. So let's go back to the old version of Tim. I would have taken this lead sheet and taken it as gospel and said, this is the piece of music, and played it. And people would have heard it and said, that's Every Time We Say Goodbye. Unless they knew better, then maybe they would have told me that I was totally wrong. And this is a way that our history of jazz can perhaps get a little bit distorted, is taking as gospel things that have been written down, especially by people that aren't the artists themselves or close to the artists themselves that compose the piece. And these versions get perpetuated over time and distorted and distorted. So the only way to really go and figure out what really is the song is either, number one, know the composer. I don't know Cole Porter. I don't believe he is with us anymore, so I can't use that option. Speaking to and working with elders of the jazz community that have played these songs for many, many years, decades, and the most, by far, probably effective way is to listen to the recordings and transcribe them directly. So my project for this song was to go back and really listen to these recordings and transcribe and figure out what's actually happening, and then kind of create my own lead sheets. So what I'm going to show you today is kind of the work that's gone into these versions of this song, Every Time We Say Goodbye. And I'm going to pull up the first one now and play it for you, which is the Benny Goodman version from 1945, which he recorded the year after the opening of 7 Live Yards. quintet version of Every Time We Say Goodbye. And in his version, he has, well, Benny Goodman's playing clarinet, I'm playing tenor saxophone, so the range is a little bit high for me, and has a little bit different timbre, of course, than if it was played on clarinet. And then, well, also I just want to say, I mean, I've worked through these 3 different versions of this song, and this is the first time I've gotten a chance to play it with my group, and it's just super fun to play with these guys. Thank you. So, I mean, they always make it sound good, no matter what I write down on the page, which is really helpful. And so this is the first version, 1945 here, and the biggest difference I think here on this lead sheet, which shows us the harmonic progression across the top, the melody, and the form, the amount of bars, and that's about it. That's all we really have happening here. The biggest difference in this lead sheet from one that you would often find in, let's say, like a real book, a jazz real book that has, a collection of a lot of standards is the rhythm, well, yes, it's hopefully right. And also, the rhythmic notation is a lot more specific. Usually when writers are putting together real books, they simplify what's happening rhythmically as much as possible. And if you are somebody working in jazz education and you're feeding students these lead sheets from the real books, you're feeding watered down versions, simplified versions of the way these songs were actually performed, sung, depicted, etc. And that's really important. To be able to actually feel the emotional quality of the song, to feel the way these artists wanted to represent this music, this writing, these ideas, you really need to actually play the rhythms correctly. It's like, okay, we take a lot of care in getting the notes correct. Why are the rhythms so much less important than the notes? They're not at all, right? So this is an accurate chart of the rhythmic representation of this chart as played by Benny Goodman. And you're just usually not going to find this written this way in lead sheets. And again, that's why it's so important to, as an artist, do the work yourself of writing out, or you don't even need to write it out as long as you've listened to it and can play it, but actually knowing the source recording, transcribing it, and playing it. So again, this is the first version, and now we're going to go to 1954, as this song was recorded by Ella Fitzgerald. And the Benny Goodman version is in E flat, and Ella Fitzgerald sings it in B flat. So this is going to be in a different key, as well as a slightly different harmonic progression. So the movement of the harmony, the movement of the melody, the movement of the motion of the tune is a little bit different. And I hope you can listen for that and maybe see what you think and the differences between the two. you can see, a little bit more, let's say, restrained or simple framing of the melody here from Ella Fitzgerald. And you could argue that perhaps that's because it's being sung by a vocalist, and there tends to be a little bit less ornamentation perhaps, but that's not always the case. So between these two versions, we can see already a fair amount of difference happening. I don't really know how much we want to get into the nitty-gritty of the difference in harmonic movement for everybody, but this might be a good time to see, are there any questions about the differences between the two songs so far, or just about every time we say goodbye in general? Yes, sir.
It says on the sheet up there that Ella is played by Ella Fitzgerald. Was she playing piano to that?
No, she was singing, and
Oh, because that says as played.
yes, and I tend to count vocals as an instrument.
Right.
Yes. So you could say, you know, as played by, as performed by, as sung by, any of them would be appropriate, I feel. Yes, sir.
When they digitize this, then can they overlay this with the other and do a comparison so that you can bounce back and forth between the two?
Are you saying, is it possible to do that right now?
Yeah,
I can go back and forth between the two,
and it's digitized?
but I don't have them on the same digitized sheet
Okay.
right now. But perhaps,
And do
I
you
should
study it
have.
that way sometimes?
yes, well, usually I'll just have them set out, you know, next to each other, or when I was working on it, I was really writing out the progressions on separate sheets and looking at the differences between them. That way, it's kind of any way that you want to see it. I've even sometimes will write it out all in the same key so that it's easier to, you know, even though she's saying it in B flat, I'll write it also in E flat to see directly the differences there. That's something that I could point out real quick here for you, just to illustrate that.
Here's the Benny Goodman version, and then the Ella Fitzgerald version. So next to each other like this, back to the Benny Goodman version. The first 4 bars of the Benny Goodman quintet version goes 1 chord or tonic, the home key to the 6 minor. Ella Fitzgerald goes 1 tonic to over the 5, back to 1 tonic over the 5. So
the same chord over the 5.
correct, the same chord then over the 5. So already you see a slight difference in movement from the very first bar, and those differences continue to change and even grow throughout the piece, where there's some fairly drastic differences, and then there's some bars that are very similar, like the 9th and 10th bar of the song, this little chromatic movement walking down is exactly the same in the key of B flat in the Ella Fitzgerald version as it is in the Benny Goodman quintet version. And to me, one of the really exciting
moments of doing this work is kind of seeing, wow, this didn't change at all across all the versions I listened to, or this chord was one that happened to be different in all 3 versions, or all 5 versions. I wonder why that is, and then you can speculate on that. Maybe you never have a great answer as to why. And then you could make arguments that perhaps the parts that aren't changed between versions are the most characteristic of the song, or the most difficult to represent in a different way, harmonically or melodically, without really changing the nature of the song. So these differences, to me, are incredibly interesting and exciting to explore, and it just gives you a thought of the evolution of this song over time. Benny Goodman and his quartet played it a certain way, then Ella Fitzgerald came along and took it and represented the song in a different way that evolved forward. And then we'll keep it evolving forward and on and on. And if you work through these versions like this, then that allows me to better be part of that evolution. I could take those three versions and say, I like this version, I don't like this version as much, maybe I like combining this and this from this version, and I really hear this chord or this moment or this melody a certain way, and then I've contributed to the evolution of the song in some small part in jazz history. Sorry, there was a question over here.
Well, there has to be some original version that Cole Porter wrote, so how do these two versions compare to his original harmonization of his two?
Well, that's a great question, and I might not have mentioned this clearly at the beginning, but the first thing that I set out to do, trying to learn the song, was to find an original version of it, was to find his writing of it, and I did not.
But it was in the show, I mean, how did they represent it in the show? Because it was part of a show first.
Right.
And, or did are you saying that Benny Goodman did it this way in the show? Was that, it was like a cast recording kind of thing?
So also the show itself, Seven Lively Arts, I've attempted to look up, videos, recordings of that, and have not found one of the production itself. There's also something where if somebody does find it, email me. I'd love to see it. And again, going back to that original source is absolutely the most awesome thing to do for it. Like I said, for this song, the only thing that I could find myself was that original lead sheet that I showed at the beginning that is copyrighted and says it's his work. But again, I find no precedent for it. So this can be something that happens with these songs. I don't know, you might have an understanding of maybe how to get some of those original versions of it. I'm not sure.
I mean, if it was, like if I was doing a project like this, and we have this incredible tool called social media that I would probably just post. And I'm trying to collect as many recordings of every time we say goodbye. Does anybody here have an original cast recording? Does anybody have access to Cole Porter's estate or something within my network of friends and musical family? I'm sure that something could have came about, but a lot of times, if it hasn't been well documented, that original Benny Goodman recording might be the only thing that still is surviving today of that cast, or the original documentation of this.
Yeah.
So you go back as far as you can find with the tools and resources that you have, and then from all of the work that you do and find different recordings and this and that, you make a version for yourself that you want to play and enjoy finding. And basically you're trying to find melodies and chord changes that are inspiring to you to improvise over. So once you get there, then you get there. But you do the work as far as it can take you. Sometimes it just leads you down another treasure map. It's like there's another clue, so you have to stop where you can, or stop where you have a dead end and then go from there.
Another thing
And his research in the real book that he found that said it was copyrighted, this and that, comes from, and so much of that is incorrect. And you have to think of, everyone needs to make a living at music. People, and the best musicians that we are familiar with, they weren't making these books because they were making a living playing, right? So not the most accomplished or well-versed or listened musician are making these books. So you're not getting the best ears and the best mind and the best heart behind these real books, because if they were the best musicians, they would have been gigging and not doing this to make money. So we have a lot of that happening in real book lore, that there's just a ton of really crummy charts out there because not the best musician got hired to do this. But they hustled that work and got paid, so congratulations.
Thanks, Richard. So, also I should say that, to take that Benny Goodman version, if it's recorded the year after Seven Lively Arts opens, and it's released as a record directly of music from the show with people from the cast, I'd say with a very high degree of certainty that it's going to be very similar to what was performed in the show. Maybe not exactly because of the context of the play, but I don't think we can be too far off base with going with somebody that was in the show with the first recorded version of it released, that's billed as from that Broadway production. So I think even though we maybe don't have his exact chart, which I would love to have, and maybe I'll reach out on social media to people, this is a pretty good place to start with it.
To prepare for tonight, I listened to a Ray Charles version of it, and that seemed even yet a little different than either of these two. Is that yet another?
I haven't listened to the Ray Charles version, so I'll go do that. I mean, while this isn't a song that I have heard played at a lot of jam sessions, like it's not a song that came into my life by hearing somebody play it live, and I think it's maybe one of the less represented of Cole Porter's songs. There still have been a lot of recordings of it, and there's plenty more for me to check out, and maybe I'll transcribe that version too. I don't know. I've got lots of stuff to do. So. You know this. Any other questions for the moment? Yes.
I have a question about, so your band here. So you created this lead sheet, and you said you didn't get to play this before. So when you guys, do you ever rehearse this together with this new lead sheet?
Well, if I had gotten here on time, like I was supposed to, then we probably would have rehearsed it a little bit. But no, I'm kidding. I'm half kidding. And I mean, this is the good thing about playing with musicians that are so deeply, intuitive about this music, and just great musicians and improvisers, is that not only are they really used to reading these kinds of charts, lead sheets, they're going to understand a lot about the context of where the music's coming from and the era of the music right away from listening. And because enough of, we're in the Western classical music realm in terms of using 12 notes. So there's 12 notes. There's only so many sets of rhythms that you usually see represented, and chord changes. So we've all seen these pieces of information arranged in different ways in other lead sheets and other songs, and really to be able to approach this song and play it well, we don't really need to rehearse it, as long as I've written the chart well. And if I make a mistake on the chart, then they're going to play exactly what I wrote as a mistake. I hope that answers. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just thinking, a lot of this music, I would imagine, would be in the studio archives of the studio that originally produced the
Mhm.
play. I'm just wondering, had you gone down that rabbit hole to see that information available?
No, I haven't checked the studio archive, and I don't believe the studio that recorded it is under the same, like, it was eventually changed or absorbed by a different thing. So, you know, it's possible that it could be there, and not necessarily, you know, just because the studio might have an archive of some information about it, they still might not have a chart for something. So the last version is actually really the version that hooked me in. When I heard this, I was just blown away by it and fell in love with it immediately. Had no idea, you know, the context of this tune and that it was written by Cole Porter in 1944 and all of this stuff. And this is the Keith Jarrett and Charlie Hayden version. And this was recorded released in 2014 on an album called Last Dance. And it's just duo, piano and upright bass. And this is even a little different version than the other two. I would say it's a little closer to the Ella Fitzgerald version than the Benny Goodman Quintet version, but again, you'll see different harmony, different representation of melody, rhythmically especially. So this is the Keith Jarrett and Charlie Hayden version of Every Time We Say Goodbye. few minutes left, but before I say the last few things, once again, this is Richard Giddens on the bass. Antonio Montañez on the drums. And Kevin Person Jr. on keyboard. And there's the Keith Jarrett and Charlie Hayden version. Once again, as you can see on the lead sheet written up here, all kinds of rhythmic things happening that you wouldn't usually see in a simplified lead sheet. And the way that Keith Jarrett represents this melody is just incredible. Rhythmically, melodically, harmonically, this is the version that speaks to me the most and I really enjoy. And as I go forward trying to incorporate this into my own playing, my own music with my group, I will kind of use this version as a jumping off point and again hopefully make some contribution, some evolution of our own to it, to move this music forward and just keep this beautiful song in everybody's memory and moving forward. I just love this tune, it's great. So any other questions about the versions here, this Keith Jarrett, Charlie Hayden version, anything in general? What reeds I play on?
Is there a recording, an actual recording?
Of this version? Yes, this was released in 2014. The album is called Last Dance, Keith Jarrett and Charlie Hayden, and it's, oh gosh, I'd have to go back and check, but I think it's either all standards or almost all standards that they play.
Part of a 2 CD set that was
Yeah,
recorded.
the first one was Jasmine, right? Yeah, they recorded 2 albums worth of material, I think in 2008 or something like that.
When I was home.
Yes, when Richard was studying with Charlie Hayden.
You told me there was a project that he couldn't tell me about, but it involved Keith, and he was flying to New York with his bass, but he couldn't tell me anything about it.
So we got 2 beautiful duo recordings out of that, both of which are fantastic. But this is on the second one that was released called Last Dance. And there's a bunch of beautiful renditions of standards on this. And we're really fortunate that they gave us this version to play and enjoy and listen to.
Thank you, Tim
Well, thank you.
Shaghoian.
Thank you for being here with us, and hope you have a safe drive home in the rain. See you soon.